So how many of you out there are from Woodstock? Okay. How many of you used to shop where Louise was the cashier at the drugstore? So you know Louise. And the rest of you will know Louise in just a second. This is a story called Louise. Just as you drive into the town of Woodstock from Route 375, there's a short strip mall on the right where the bank, a drugstore, and health food store all do business. We all know it very well. Life revolves around that strip mall. Louise had worked the register at the drugstore for over 35 years when Forrest and I met her for the first time. This was before cancer, when Forrest was just a regular kid with vaguely strawberry blonde hair and a contagious smile. The day we met Louise, Forrest and I had gone into the drugstore to get a bottle of water. It was a hot day, and we'd heard that hers was the cheapest in town. After we found the cooler and grabbed some water, we headed over to the register to check out. Forrest loved to pay for things, so I picked him up and gave him the money to give to Louise. I liked her immediately. Interesting, I couldn't do that. I liked her immediately, of course I did. I had to love Louise. I liked her immediately. She was petite and sassy and looked to be in her mid-60s, although she told me later she was closer to 75. Forrest looked at her with the seriousness of someone who knows how important money is, then reached over and offered her his $1 bill. She took the money and with a playful smile asked, "Who's this?" I said, "This is Forrest. It's the first time he's been in your store." She looked him right in the eye and said, "Will you come visit me again? Maybe tomorrow?" He was shy about answering, but I could tell he liked her too. So I told her we would love to come back, so we did. For days after that, we went almost every morning. Some days we bought water, some days we just stopped in to say hello. On other days, we'd knock on the window near her cash register, and she'd turn around, slap the top of her thighs, and open her mouth as wide as she could, as though she was completely surprised and delighted to see Forrest standing there again. Whenever we came to the store, she'd say, "Forrest," as though she hadn't seen him in weeks, even if we'd been there the day before. He'd run around to the back of her counter, and they'd giggle, and she'd say things like, "How are you today, Forrest?" or "What have you been up to this morning?" He didn't know too many words at that point, so he'd say what he could, or he'd point at something in the store that he wanted her to see. We'd stay for a few minutes, then say goodbye and continue on our way. One morning, after several weeks of almost daily visits with Louise, Forrest and I had been to the bank and were headed over to the health food store to buy some groceries. That meant we would be passing Louise's store on the way. But before we got there, Forrest pulled me back towards the bank. He squatted down on the sidewalk in front of the building and started looking at all of the white stones that were spread out there in lieu of grass. He was obviously searching for something. Finally, he found what he wanted. He stood up and showed me the stone in his hand and said, "Louise." It was a present. He wanted to give her something, and this was it. When we got to the drugstore, we knocked on the window to let Louise know we were there, and then we hurried into the store. Forrest ran around to the back of her register, held up his palm, and said, "Louise," again, and then gave her the stone. 2 weeks later, Forrest was diagnosed. Everyone knew. Our town is small and news travels quickly. We assumed that Louise had heard, and she had. We didn't see her for many weeks, but when we were in the hospital, we encouraged Forrest by telling him that as soon as he felt better, he could go to see Louise again. That thought made his eyes light up even on his hardest days. When we got back to town, we stopped to see her, but our visit was subdued. It was like that with everyone. Forrest felt lousy, and people were adjusting to the sight of his skinny body and his thinning hair. Over time, we all got used to the new reality, but it took a while. Forrest and I were leaving the bank again many weeks later when he stopped abruptly to look at all the stones again. He was still inward and unwilling to use his voice as a result of the trauma he'd been through. But he crouched down anyway and picked out another stone. This time, though, he put it in his pocket. When we got to the drugstore, he stopped me again and indicated that he wanted to go inside. I opened the door for him, and he quietly went around to the back of Louise's counter and waited while she helped another customer. When she finally saw him, she said, "Hello, Forrest," and he pulled the stone out of his pocket and handed it to her. She was speechless as he smiled shyly back up at her. From that day on, gifts from between Forrest and Louise became routine. He would bring her a stone, or she would give him a matchbox truck, a Beanie Baby, or a trinket of some kind. It didn't happen every day. Sometimes he gave her something. Sometimes she gave him something. On the in-between days, we'd stop to say hello, and Louise would say, "Forrest," in the same excited way she always had. Louise's sister died the same day as Forrest. Her body was laid out for viewing at the same funeral parlor on the same night as Forrest. Louise was there, of course, but she never came in. She didn't want to see Forrest in a box. Her cousin came over instead. She told me she'd left a little truck for Forrest next to his right hand. Louise's sister is buried near Forrest, too, so every now and then, even recently, I find a truck out there, and I know it's from Louise.